Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. So today we continue to discuss about the eight paths, and last time we discussed briefly about the right concentrations, and we study according to the Buddha teachings in both traditions, Mahayana and Theravada traditions, in the samatha or concentrations. There are 40 meditation subjects that we can concentrate our mind on those subjects so that we can sharpen our mind. And last time we discussed about the first 10, like earth, water, fire, air. So those are the 4 elements. And the next groups is the colors: blue, yellow, red, white, bright lights, and enclosed space. So the next 10 are the object of repulsion. That's when we could contemplate the dead corpse, like the swollen corpse, discolor corpse, pestilent corpse, fissured corpse, grey corpse, dismember corpse, bleeding corpse, worms in corpse, and skeleton. And the next one are the 10 recollections, like the recollection of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, morality, liberality, and the last one is the wholesome attribute of devas or celestial beings. That's where we stopped last time. So those are the recollection that we may contemplate to recognize, to recollect, or to remember their virtue and blessing. Again, like the Buddha, the one that has attained enlightenment, we contemplate and remember how he attained enlightenment, how he become Buddha, and how he provided Dharma. That means his teachings for us to follow, to attain that state of mind. And the Sangha, that means the monastic communities mainly, and the moralities that we may need to follow so that we would not create much bad karma. And the liberality, that means the reason why we practice Buddhism or meditations is to be liberated by all of the defilements or the attachment. And the last one, the wholesome attribute of devas, that when we remember or think about their wholesome karmas, we would follow that kind of practice so that we develop the good karma for ourselves, so that at least according to the Buddha teachings, while we still revolve in samsara or the birth cycle, we at least gain some merit to be reborn in the human realms or in the celestial realms. But in order to be reborn in those favorable destinations, we need to generate the wholesome karma. So the next one we today discuss about the recollection of the body, of the death, and the breath. It relates to how we do meditation, how we contemplate what's going on in our body, and especially our breath. Usually we think too much about external things like our jobs, like our relationships, our wealth, our success, and so forth. We may not have times to recognize what's going on in this physical body. But when we sick, we would go to see a doctor or hospital to take care of our body. But for us, our body is so strange that we may not pay attention much. That's why here the Buddha reminds us that we need to pay attention, be mindful of our body, and the first step for us to recognize or be mindful of our body is to be mindful of our breath, because the breath is so important in our life. Without breathing and out, there's no way for us to survive for from 5 to 10 minutes. Of course, we can skip eating for a couple of days, or even skip drinking for a couple of days, but we cannot skip breathing even 10 minutes. But most of the time, we put all our concerns and the external things like wealth, material success, fame, relationship, and so forth. We concern them more than what's going on in this physical body. And we don't know that without the breathing, we would not be survived for that short periods of time, up to 10 minutes, because for our brain, with without oxygen, would be harmful to our brain and nervous system without consuming enough oxygen up to 10 minutes, because our brain needs at least 20% of oxygen for it to operate. Now I'd like to discuss how we need to be mindful with our breath, and start with that kind of mindfulness. We can be mindful with our feeling, and from that we could be mindful with our own mind, and eventually we will be mindful with all of the phenomena internally and externally. That's why the Buddha, in many aspects of the teaching, emphasize on the practice of breath meditation. Again, this kind of practice is prevalent in most of Buddhist traditions, whether it's in Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana, and so forth. Most traditions use this basic mindfulness practice to bring the mind inwardly, instead of letting the mind chase after things externally. So again, we most of the time forget what we have in front of our nose. We take things for granted. We thought that, oh, that's the breath, and we may not pay attention much about it. But if we observe some elderly people, they may have problem of breathing out, or they may not have enough energy to do that type of inhalation, exhalation. That's why some of them may carry the oxygen bottles around. But for us, the one are still healthy, we take things for granted. We thought that should follow us for the rest of our life. But imagine when we be that age, like 80, 90, 100 and so forth, we may not have enough strength, energy to do that jobs physically. The inhalation and exhalation, we may be dependent on that kind of oxygen bottles. So in this contemplation of the breath, the Buddha reminds us that we don't need to implement anything else. We don't need to manipulate our breath. Whichever breath we have, we just be observer, whether our breath is long or short, shallow or deep. We just observe and accept the way they are. For example, when we inhale, we have the short, deep, a long, or short, shallow or deep. We can accept it as the way it is. When we have exhalation, again, whether it's short or long, we still accept it as the way it is. We don't need to manipulate the breath. So when the breath come in, we recognize. When the breath come out, we recognize. So with that type of recognitions, we increase our awareness. But let me step one step back and explain the importance of the breath in our life. The breaths maybe in synchronize with the state of our body and our mind. For example, when we work hard physically, we tend to have the strong and coarse breath because we need to consume more oxygen while we doing the physical work. And at the same time, when we stress out so much, when we have so much anxiety, when we're so frightened, or when we have some kind of mental affliction, emotional fluctuation, we tend to have strong and coarse breath. Or we may have shallow, irregular, and quick breaths because we need to consume more oxygen when we have that kind of mental fluctuation, emotional afflictions. But on the other hand, when we calm, relax, settle, our breath tend to be more slow, deep, and rarer. So again, the breath are in synchronize with the functions of our body and mind. So here, let me share with you the screen. We know that the function of our breath is to exchange the gas. We inhale oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide. With this kind of respiratory system, we exchange the gas so that we can be healthy. And here we see that even from 5 to 10 minutes, we don't have enough oxygen that may result in permanent brain damage. And because we know that about 20% of the total blood and oxygen is in our brain. It uses 20% of that total blood and oxygen. So that's why the exchanging of oxygen and carbon dioxide is so important. We inhale oxygen to nurture our entire body, especially the brain. You can see that we get more oxygen to our brain. Oxygen deters the aging of human cell. Oxygen helps relieve headaches. Oxygen alleviates tiredness. Oxygen boosts the immune system. Oxygen supports the breathing of air in case of asthma and allergies. Oxygen help in the cases of depressions. Oxygen improve physical performance by up to 20%, 25%. So that's why you see that this kind of changing, especially inhalation of oxygen, is so important in our life. But many of us may not pay attention much about what's going on with our breath. So here, according to some statistics, the average respiratory rates by age, the newborn, they have the average of 44 breaths per minute. The infants, 20 to 40. The preschool children, 20 to 30. Older children from 16 to 25. Others from 12 to 20 per minute. And others during the strenuous exercise 35 to 45, and athletes peaks from 60 to 70 breaths per minute. But of course, this is an average. Everyone's is different. Again, so we get the information so that we can know, but depend upon the physical makeups of every one of us, like whether we are male, female, young or old, healthy, illness, and so forth. We may have different rates of breaths per minute. And according to scientists' point, it's better to breathe in and out through the nose. And here it said that the research shows more benefits with nose breathing, with slow breathing, more air resistant when exhaling, because our nose is built with the filters, the hair within our nose that filter out all those unwanted agent before we inhale the air into our lung. It would help us to humidify the air, reduce the fluid loss. So that is the function of our nose. So it's better to breathe in and out through the nose than the mouth. And of course, we have the concentration phases. The first phase, inspiration, inhalations, and we inhale for a while until the whole cycle stop. We have that type of pose, and after that we have exhalation, and we have a quick pose, and so forth with the whole cycle. The importance for us to recognize what's going on is to pay attention on our breath. Again, there's the first step or initial step for us to be mindful with what's going on in our physical body. And if we pay attention on our breath, we recognize what's going on with them, whether it's inhalation, exhalation. Eventually, we would recognize organ sensations or feelings around our body, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And if we know what's going on with our sensation or feelings, eventually we could recognize our own thoughts. Whichever thought that pop up in our mind, whether it's a peaceful thought, a violent thought, angry thought, anxious thought, whichever, we could recognize them. But up to now, if we don't do any kind of practice of this kind of mindfulness of the breath, there's no way for us to recognize them. For example, if we sit nearby a swimming pool, yes, the swimming pool that has the clear water, clean water. So let's say if we pick a piece of rock and threw it down to the bottoms of the that swimming pool. So when that rock sink down to the bottom of the swimming pool, when it gets hit to the bottom, we see a little bubble start to move up, and the higher the bubble moves, the bigger it is until it hits to the surface of the swimming pool. It's breaking out. So again, for us, especially our mentality works in that way. Let's say while we talking with someone else, and somehow they irritate us, they scold, swear, or yell at us. It's like they threw the rock into our mind. So at that moment, if we have some skill of contemplations or mindfulness, we could recognize our own thought. We recognize the thought of angriness, the thought of hatred toward that person that pop up within our own mind. But usually, if we don't have any kind of practice, we would drag right away. We either yell back, scold back, swear, and so forth. And of course, it's too late for us to say sorry later on. So that's why when we do breath meditation, we recognize what's going on in our body first. And when we anchor our mind with the breath, eventually all the thoughts that bother us, all the thoughts that try to pull us away from the concentration, from the focuses on the breath, eventually will be sailed out. Otherwise, if we don't have any kind of object of concentrations, it's easy for us to swim back and forth between the past and the future. And we know that the past is past. We cannot get back to the past. But most of times, while we sitting by ourselves, if we don't do things much, we tend to remember things that we be proud of. But on the other hand, we may remember something that we feel sad, we feel regret, and so forth. So with that kind of thoughts, it disturb our peacefulness and happiness in the present moment. According to some professors at the University of Southern California, they say that usually whenever we think or remember about the past, we have more tendency to lean toward the negative aspect of the past. That's why with that type of negative views, definitely it will disturb peacefulness and happiness, and we would view ourselves, others, and the environment in a negative way, mostly, and will affect to how we react to ourselves, others, and the environment, mostly in the negative way too. Of course, it will be damaging and harmful if we have that kind of negative thoughts. And of course, when we have the thought about the future, definitely the future has not come yet, but we may extra draw the plans of the future beautifully, but somehow it's just future, and it may create more anxiety for us to have that type of expectation. And that's why usually I tell my students, whenever they walk into the class to take the test, they need to be prepared well and let go of all expectation. If they expect themselves to get the high score or the maximum score on the test, what happened when they got back to when they get back the test and they could not have the score that they expect to have, they would be more frustrated, angry. So that's why for us, yes, we can be prepared for things that we can handle, that's within our reach. For example, we can make the appointments to see doctor even weeks or months in advance. But that's the way we can make, we can do, or we can make the plans to build a house, to do certain things that we have ability to handle. For example, we may put aside $100,000 to buy a new house, for example, or for the student, they may study for SAT or ACT test, so that they could get into the elites or good university. That's good preparations. But the points I want to mention is that yes, we can make the arrangement, we can make the schedule, win or reach for the new future. But if we have so much expectation, if we have so much calculation, if we have so much drawing plans for the future that out of our reach, it would bring more disaster or frustration of ourselves. So again, if we think too much about the past, if we think too much about the future, we lost the present moment. And when we lost the present moment, we cannot get back it at all. So that's why the Buddha reminds us that the easy way for us to be at the present moment is to start with the contemplations, mindfulness of the breath. So the breath always with us for the rest of our life. When we don't lose life, our breath will not be here anymore. But as long as we're still alive, it's still with us. So the other object of meditation, like the earth, the water, the fire, the wind, the color, and so forth. Yes, we can be mindful with them, but we need to have them. For example, we can contemplate about a rock. Yes, we need to hold the rocks actually so that we could feel how the rocks weight and the shape of the rock and so forth. Or if we want to focus our mind on the light of candles, yes, we need to have that candle light for us to focus our mind on. But for the breath, it's there with us. As long as we're still alive, it's here with us. We don't need to seek out. We don't need to borrow it from other people. It's there with us for the rest of our life. So that's why when we be mindful with our breath, that's the starting point for us to be with the present moment. So again, it's like the floating boat or ship. It should have the anchors to be stationary on the ocean, on the river, and so forth. Without the anchors, all kind of waves or the winds would blow or push the ship or the boat away from original places. So that's why contemplating or be mindful of the breath is the way for us to anchor our mind instead of letting our mind go back to the past or having too much expectation or thinking about the future or anything that may occur in our mind, all kind of thinkings that may disturb our mentality. So that's why we start with the breath contemplation, the breath focuses. So again, the practice is that we just still, as well as we keep our back and neck straight up, and we just let our breath come in and out of our body normally and naturally. Because since we were born inside our mother wombs, our body has a type mechanism, the inhalation and exhalation mechanism. We don't need to manipulate that kind of mechanism anymore. We don't need to add on, etc. We don't need to push the air out or pull the air in. The only thing we need to do is to be observer, to be mindful. Like we stand nearby the door or the gate. Whoever come in the house, we know. Whoever get out of the house, we know. That's all. With that kind of knowing, with it, eventually help us to have that kind of awareness. So it's just simple in that way, but many of us, they may not recognize us. Again, breath meditation in Buddhism probably different from um, breath yoga in the way that they hold the breath at a certain place um, uh, around the body. But in Buddhist training, we don't need to hold our breath. We don't need to do anything physically and mentally. We can let the breath flow in and out of our body naturally. The only thing we need to be is uh, mm, to absorb and mindful of them. That's all. And that's the way we can let our body and mind go back to equilibrium state, or homeostatic state, so that we could have more peace and relaxation. For example, if we just absorb our breath come into our body through inhalations, if we can absorb the breath coming out of our body, with this oxygen or carbon dioxide, we could be aware of those breaths, and that's all we need to do. So again, when we let the body does that type of mechanism, inhalations and exhalation, we recognize the air coming to our body, the cold air that come into our body, and when we have exhalation, we recognize the warm air coming out of our body. And that's what we need to do. And with that kind of activities, or you can say the passive stand, uh, our physical body would not need to consume much energy to push the air out or to pull the air in. That's why we can be relaxed physically and mentally. We stand there as an observer to let the body mechanism does a job of inhalation and exhalation without any kind of manipulation, any kind of pushing, pulling, and so forth. Mentally, I'm more peaceful. So we want to let our body and mind to remain in that kind of equilibrium state. So that is the way we train our body and mind to be relaxed and to be peaceful by just following and absorbing the breath. It's just simple, but somehow many of us could not recognize us. So let me show you now the diagram. So here we can follow the breath. If we can follow the breath in the mindful way, we would have the calmness, containment, concentration. And of course, while we concentrate on our breath, we may have some distraction worriness, stress, whichever pop up in our mind. We try to regain the awareness. And of course, we would build up our kindness, patience, and gentleness. And it would help us to follow that kind of pattern, the breath pattern. So again, if my wandering is normal for us to have all kind of thinking in our mind, because that tendency we have since we were born, and every day, even in our dreams, our mind still functioning and inactive. When we wake up, we have other thinking too. We think about, oh, we be ready for working, we be ready for go to school, and so forth. And with that kind of thinking, it is easy for us to have all kind of thoughts that pop up and go in our mind. So that's why with the mindfulness of breath, we bring the awareness back to the breath itself. Uh, so focusing on the breath is like providing the minds and anchors to stabilize our mentalities, and with that type of awareness, we would stabilize our mind. And if somehow we have all kind of thinking, we need to sustain or maintain that type of focuses in that kind of practice. Here, I want to show you. This is normal breathing, breath holding, deep sigh, hyperventilation, and then normal breathing. So this is the graph diagram that show the breathing pattern of disorder. And here inhalations is short, exhalation long, inhalation, exhalation, and here the pattern of severely sick people, breathing in the pattern of people who have some kind of illness, breathing in the normal situation, like us, and the ideal breathing pattern, that's the longer breath, 3 breaths per minute. So whether it's 3 breaths per minute, 12 breaths per minute, and so forth, we don't need to manipulate that. We don't need to prolong our breath, as explained later on. So here, the breathing in the sick subject, and it has a short breath, and breathing holding is longer, and normal breathing. And this one, inhalation, exhalation, the smaller breath in, relax breath out, and so forth. Tolerable air shortage, good breathing control. Too much of an air shortage, breathing in chaos. So again, this is the breath, and here according to some experts, I say that we can count A, B, C for inhalation, E, F, G for exhalation, and there's some types of benefit to have abdominal breathing, improve blood oxygenation, allow more efficient gas exchange to take place, reduce stress levels, activates and the rest and digestive response, matches the abdomen's organs, improve digestion, relieve tension in the neck and shoulder, and contribute to good posture, reduce blood pressure, and has been shown improved attention span. So these are the abdominal breathing in this diagram. And here, one research, they say this is some benefit of deep breathing. We know that 70% of toxins are released simply by breathing properly. If we could not breathe properly, the toxin will remain in our body. And so when we have deep breathing, it will release our tension. For example, when we are afraid or stressed out and nervous, our breathing pattern change. So if we have the slow and deep breathing, it would help us to relax our mind too, like we discussed how the breath synchronize with the physical and mental makeups of our life. Again, It releases the emotional distress. It clears all the negative and confused feeling. It improves our blood circulation. It elevates our mood. It increases the pressure of induced chemicals in our body. So one more time here, it re-energize the vital channels energy. It balance our mind and body. It helps to balance the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And here the change for our breath help us to change our life, low stress level, uh, alleviate negative emotions, stimulate brain growth, restful sleep, increase the energy, efficient blood oxygen exchange. So again, so these are the benefit of slow and deep breath. But one more thing I want to mention before I stop here today, that we don't need to manipulate our breath so that we can hold or have slow or deeper breath. We just follow and absorb the breath. At first, we may have strong, shallow, or quick breaths, but as much as we follow and be absorber of the breath, eventually it will come back to the equivalent state. It's like this pendulum. If we don't use any force at all, the pendulum eventually, when it swings back and forth between left and right, eventually it will come to rest at the neutral, at the midpoint. So there's a breath. If we don't manipulate, if we don't use any force, whether it's physical or mental force, eventually our breath will be slower and deeper. We never do anything. So let me stop here today, and next time we can discuss further about the breath meditation as well as meditation on the body, feeling, and so forth. But again, please remember that breath meditation, even this is the basic practice, but it's so important for the meditators to recognize and put in practice because it's the first step for us to bring the mind back to the equilibrium state or the stable state of mind. Okay, thank you. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.